what I want to point out is this. We're outside the old city. In fact, the only thing that you can't find inside the walls of the old city is ancient Jerusalem. Crazy, right? If y'all would have come here 100 years ago, 150 years ago, and you would have said, we're coming to Israel, we want to see everything, but we also want to see ancient Jerusalem, where everything started. All the important stories of David and Solomon and the kings. Where should we go? It would be during the time period of the Ottoman Empire, and they would have said, yeah, see that? That's the old city right up there. There's the temple, the old city, that's where it all happened. And the reason is that where we're standing right now, 150 years ago, you would be in the middle of potato fields. There was nothing here. It was just empty fields outside the walls of the old city until what happens? 150 years ago, the Queen of England, Queen Victoria, sends a man by the name of Charles Warren. Captain Charles Warren says, Warren, I want you to go to Israel and I want you to dig and bring back treasures from the temple, from the Bible. Go for it. Sends him on a boat. He comes here, and first place that he goes is where? Temple Mount, right? It's the most important place. The temples are there. He knocks on the door. He's ready to dig. And the Muslim Waqf who are in charge then look at him and they laugh at him. They kick him out and they say, you're crazy. This is the most holy spot in the country. You're not digging here ever. Now, if the queen sends you to dig in Israel, you can't just come back and be like, listen, queen, sorry, I couldn't dig. They kicked me out. I don't know what to do. So what did he do? He walks down this big valley, and this valley is called the Kidron Valley. So he's washing his face down there, and he says, wait a minute. He looks, and right where the water is coming out of the rock, he notices that there's almost like a tunnel that has been dug up and filled in. He says, you know what, I'm gonna dig here. He starts digging, and he's pulling out artifacts from 3,000, 4,000 years ago. And he's shocked, because he's all the way down there, and the old city's all the way up there. What are these artifacts even doing here? And he keeps digging, he's digging and digging, and suddenly he notices that the flame on his torch just starts dancing wildly. There must be air coming in from somewhere, and he looks up, and he sees a 50-foot straight-up vertical shaft. All right, he's an archaeologist. He gets out his ropes, his ladders. He climbs up. Where does he end up? In the middle of the potato fields outside the walls of the old city. And he has that eureka moment. He says, wait a minute. Why would someone dig a tunnel 4,000 years ago from the middle of this empty field straight to the water if there wasn't something here before? And he tells the world, he says, guys, you got it all wrong. That's not ancient Jerusalem. Ancient Jerusalem is down here. And people say, Captain Charles Warren, what you're saying is insane, and no one believes him. But archaeologists start saying, well, wait a minute, he's finding lots of cool stuff here, we're gonna come dig too. And slowly but surely, they pretty much start finding, for the past 150 years, all of the ancient stories of the Bible. In order to explain it, I have to open up this book. Bestseller, by the way. It's still the bestseller.
The Bible?
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
This is also, by the way, the only place, or one of the only places in the world where I can open this book and read it for you and point to where it happened.
Wow.
It's different when you're back in America and you're reading it and you're getting inspired. You can't see what's happening. I'm going to show you where it happened. So let's do that. We're going to open up to Samuel 2, chapter 5.
It's crazy.
I'm going to start reading from passage 6. These passages were not understood up until about 150 years ago. And here we go. Vayelech hamelech v'anashav Yerushalayim, and the king and his men go to Jerusalem. El Yevusi yoshev haaretz, to the Jebusite who are dwelling in the land. Vayomel David lemor, and he says to David, saying, who's he? The Jebusite king. He's looking down there, David and his soldier, and he says to him, saying, what does he say? Lo tavohena, ki em asircha ha'ivrim v'apischim. You can't come here unless you go through the blind and the lame. That's a weird thing to say to someone who's trying to conquer your people, right? What is it? It's an ancient diss. He says, I can put blind and lame people on my walls and you still won't be able to conquer. And you know what? He was right. The next passage is a passage that we don't understand until 150 years ago. Why? Because there's a word here that we don't understand. This word, by the way, is a modern Hebrew word. I'm going to teach it to you. You probably will never need to use it in your life, but you'll know it, so that's awesome. This is what it says. Vayomer David bayomahu, and David said on that day, Kol makeh yevusi vayiga b'tzinor. Anyone who wants to strike the Jebusite stronghold, the fortress, has to go through, and here's the word, ready? Tzino. Everybody say it? Tzino. Tzino. This is the only time this word exists in all of Scripture. And in Hebrew, if you were to tell an Israeli what tzinoor means, they would be like, a pipe. And if you had to explain to someone who doesn't know English what a pipe is, you would say, well, it's this thing that moves liquid from point A to point B. What is that 3,000 years ago? A tunnel. What's the problem? That's the city of David. There is no tunnel. There's no water system. There's no water tunnel. There's not even water in there. So no one knew what this was talking about. Now, we know that David had military intelligence. He knew that underneath this city, there's a tunnel to help the people get to the water safely during times of war. And he says to his men, anyone who is brave enough to infiltrate the water system, climb up behind enemy lines into the city, open the gates from the inside, and let my army in, he's going to be the head of my army. And that's what happens. Joab, son of Tzeruiah, climbs up the tunnel, opens up the gates. Jerusalem is born. History is changed forever. But what's even crazier? What's crazier? 3,000 years later, Captain Charles Warren is climbing up this random tunnel, and he has no clue that the same way that he's discovering that ancient Jerusalem's over here is the same way that David originally enters the city. Coincidence? Nah, I think not. If you guys look to the south, you can see another big mountain range with trees on it. Does everybody see that big long mountain with trees? Can you see the antennas to the left?
Yeah.
If you go a little bit to the right, you'll see like a castle with a flag standing on it. Does everybody see that?
Yeah.
That is the UN headquarters in Jerusalem today. That's also the High Commissioner's Palace during the time period of the British, which is why that mountain is called the Mount of the High Commissioner. It's also, however, most likely the place where Abraham stops on his way to do the binding of Isaac, where the scripture says, and he stopped and he looked up and he saw the place from afar, because this is the first place that he could have actually seen Mount Moriah from coming from the south, because everything else is lower. So it's a really nice lookout if your tour guide ever takes you there. That's another mountain. You guys look to the west, there's another big mountain. Everybody see that big minaret and church on top of that hill up there? Mm-hmm. That is the Dormition Abbey and the Tomb of David. And then we have the mountain, which is the Old City. The Old City is also a mountain. So we're surrounded by mountains, and I want to end on this note. 3,000 years ago, David comes here. He creates Jerusalem. History's changed. He looks at this view. It's all empty and beautiful. And he opens up his book of Psalms, which he's still in the middle of writing. And he writes a passage. He adds, Jerusalem, mountains surround you as God surrounds his people. Now, up until 150 years ago, if that's ancient Jerusalem, then that poetry doesn't make any sense, and it's just a nice poem, but it has nothing to do with reality. But 150 years ago, when we realized that this is Jerusalem down here, suddenly we see that David's not just writing beautiful poetry and beautiful songs. He's describing what Jerusalem looked like 3,000 years ago, which also can make us understand maybe that Psalms itself may not just be beautiful poetry, rather actual descriptions of things that David goes through during his life.